On today's Locked On Giants podcast, can Malik Nabers save Daniel Jones's Giants career? I'll tell you why he can't. Coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Train, a credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for the New York Giants team page over on the Fan Nation Network. Find us at si.com/NFL/Giants. And a special welcome, as always, to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers. Those of you who are new, welcome. And of course, everybody in between, thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, can Malik Nabers save Daniel Jones's career? I'm going to tell you why he can't. So we're going to tackle that question first. And then in segment 2, we're going to take a look at some breakout candidates for the New York Giants in 2024 on both the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. And then we'll wrap things up in segment 3 with some final thoughts on the 2024 schedule for the New York Giants, key games, keys to the season, all that good stuff. So that's our agenda for today's show. Again, happy Friday to everybody and welcome on in. Let's get to it. All right. Can Malik Nabers be the savior for Daniel Jones's career? Now, before I tell you why I don't think he can be, let's just backtrack a little bit here. Daniel Jones is at a crossroads here. All right. I'm not ragging on the guy. I'm just stating the facts. He is at a crossroads. All right. He had a good season in 2022 under Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka and company. Last year, not so good of a season. And I know a lot of you are going to say, those of you at least who support Jones are going to say, well, his offensive line was bad. Well, he didn't have Saquon Barkley. He didn't have Andrew Thomas. He didn't have this. He didn't have that. Folks, I get all that. I really do. But Daniel Jones regressed last year, whether it was because he was shell-shocked, whether it was because, they tried to take the offense to the next level and he just couldn't do it. Whatever the reason was, Daniel Jones regressed last year. And you're not going to sit there and convince me that every single play that Daniel Jones was out there on the field, that he was under duress, that he didn't have a receiver open. There were times on film where you can see that he had somebody open and he just didn't see him. You could see on film that he had time to throw the ball. And for whatever the reason, the clock in his head was all screwed up. So, that led to some poor play. It didn't help. The injuries certainly didn't help, to the offensive line, to Saquon, to Darren Waller. All that did not help. Nor did it help that Daniel Jones went and got injured again. First, he had the stinger, which caused him to miss 3 games. Then he comes back, and then he tears his ACL, which now, by the way, makes you wonder how good is he going to be as far as his mobility moving forward. All right, so what did the Giants do this year? Well, everybody thought, or most of us thought, I should say, that the Giants were going to draft a quarterback from a very deep quarterback class. That did not happen. So Joe Shane, the general manager, Brian Daboll, the head coach, they pivoted and went to plan B. And plan B is to build up around the quarterback position. So they added Malik Nabers, wide receiver, which we kind of knew they were going to do. They added Tyrone Tracy in the 5th round, a running back, to that committee that they're building. And they added Theo Johnson in the 4th round, a tight end. Regardless of what happens with Darren Waller, they added some firepower to the offense. But the centerpiece is obviously Malik Nabers. And when Malik Nabers was drafted, a lot of people were like, okay, This is a guy who's going to save Daniel Jones. Folks, I think that's just very unfair to put that on Malik Nabers. All right. Now, Malik Nabers, he's going to be the Giants' first legitimate X receiver since Odell Beckham Jr. He's going to have the type of impact on the offense that Odell had when he was here. Mainly, he's going to be able to draw double coverage. He's going to open things up on the outside for the other receivers. He's going to give the quarterback, whether it's Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, or whoever, Tommy DeVito, or if it's Nathan Rourke, whoever the quarterback is, going to give him a nice big target, a guy who can separate, a guy who can pick up yards after the catch. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's not enough to save the quarterback. Because here's the thing. The quarterback has to start with himself. He has to save himself. What do I mean by that? Well, for starters, he has to be able to feel the heat in the pocket, something that Jones just has not been able to do on a consistent basis. All right. There have been times when he's held the ball too long. There's been times when he has tried to force a throw into a window that just wasn't there. There have been times when he has taken off as a runner and pushed ahead and tried to get that extra yard or two, when in fact he probably should have given up on the play a little sooner for the sake of his health. These are things that need to stop moving forward. Okay. The other thing with Daniel Jones is he's got to improve the post-snap processing. That was a big problem for him, and it's been a problem for him for most of his career. So by that, I mean, he's looking down the field after the ball is snapped, and now all of a sudden, okay, where are you going with the ball? How is his decision making? Daniel Jones can make all the throws. That's not the problem. But the post-snap processing, too slow to basically recognize things. I mean, you can go back and you can put together a film and see where Jones missed guys who were wide open because that internal clock of his was either messed up or he just didn't see it for whatever the reason. So, yes, having a Malik Nabers is going to be a big boost to the offense, but Jones needs to do his part as well. And here's the other thing that is going to help Jones, I think, more so than Malik Nabers, and that is the offensive line. All right. Now, we've seen a historically bad Giants offensive line. Last year, they were credited with giving up 85 sacks, which was the second most sacks in league history since sacks became a tracked statistic. They need to obviously do a better job with the blocking. That is a huge, huge problem. And, look, if Daniel Jones is going to get back to being the quarterback he was in 2022, when he took the team to the playoffs, he needs some protection because this guy, if his internal clock gets screwed up, he's basically cooked. And that's another concern, I think. When I talk about Daniel Jones has to help himself, you're going to get hit as a quarterback. You're going to get pressured as a quarterback. Not everything is going to be perfect on every single play. It's what you do when things break down around you. All right. And I think that was a problem. I looked at Pro Football Focus, some stats. Jones was responsible for 20% of the quarterback pressures he absorbed in the games he played last year, the highest of the three quarterbacks. And again, whether that was because he was holding the ball too long or just not seeing the field or whatever the case may be, 20% of the pressures that he faced were on him, not so much the offensive line. Because to expect the offensive line to hold their blocks for more than 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever, that's asking a lot. And it just doesn't end well when you get into that range. So, yes, the offensive line does need to hold its blocks a bit longer in terms of you can't have at the snap, you can't have a jailbreak coming at the quarterback to rush him. That was a problem. But that being said, there has to be a happy medium. And I don't think the Giants and Daniel Jones have quite found that happy medium. The other thing I will mention real quick is Jones's mobility. His ability to run has been a bread and butter for him. Coming off that ACL, I wonder how much the Giants are going to have to pull him back a little bit in terms of those design runs that he did so well. That would be a concern of mine as well. And then the other concern I would have, I would say going forward, is that as we get through the rest of the spring, into the training camp, into the preseason, how much time is Daniel Jones actually going to get in live reps? And I'm talking about game reps, all right? When we get to training camp and the preseason, I'm pretty sure Daniel Jones is not going to play those preseason games, which means he's going to have to build his chemistry with not just Malik Nabers and Theo Johnson, but with everybody. He's going to have to build that chemistry and that timing in practice. And no matter how hard coaches try to simulate the tempo in practice, it's just not the same as the game. So, that all being said, Malik Nabers is a wonderful addition to the Giants offense. I'm glad they got him. But anybody who thinks he's going to save Daniel Jones and suddenly, turn him back into the quarterback he was in 2022, I just don't see it happening. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see it happening because there's just too many other factors that need to fall into place for Daniel Jones to prove to the Giants that he can be the guy moving forward. Now, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's here, they didn't take a quarterback. So look, you support who's on the team, but make a believer out of me. There was a time that I thought he could be that guy. Haven't really seen it since. Make a believer out of me. And I'll happily admit I was wrong that, the Giants had to draft a quarterback, that they made a mistake in not drafting a quarterback. Hopefully I will be able to admit that I'm wrong, because he will have made a believer out of me. All right, coming up next, I have some breakout candidates I want to talk about for 2024. That'll be right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. If you're like me and you're liking the New York Knicks odds or the New York Rangers odds as they pursue championship immortality in their respective sports, you'll want to be part of the action. And right now, when you sign up for an account on FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Happy Friday to everybody. We made it through another week, and we are a couple weeks still away from OTA starting, which is phase 3 of the offseason. So we will, of course, have that coverage for you, as well as continued coverage here on the Locked On Giants podcast every day, Monday through Friday, because that's what we do. That's what you guys ask for, and we deliver. So that being said, let's get into our next segment, some breakout candidates for the Giants in 2024. Now, I picked out 2 on offense and 2 on defense. A couple of them might be obvious, but I'll just go into why I picked these guys. And there might be a couple that you're going to say, what? What are you picking those guys for? So let me start off with the offensive side of the ball. And obviously, I'm going to start with Wan'Dale Robinson, wide receiver. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson, what's interesting is last year he really started to come on. Once he got over that final hump with his knee, he was coming off the ACL surgery and he was able to get over that final hump. You actually saw some flashes of how good Wan'Dale Robinson could really be in this offense. But what's interesting, though, is that the Giants, in adding Allen Robinson to the mix, and I talked about this on a previous show, my everydayers will know this, Allen Robinson gives the Giants a bigger slot option. All right, so you've got Wan'Dale, who's the smaller, shiftier guy, and Allen Robinson, who's the bigger, more physical guy. So it kind of gives the Giants coaches a little bit of a change-up if they need it. But with Wan'Dale Robinson, this is a guy who I think they're, going to use him out of the backfield, the gadget player. He's a guy that can pick up the yards after the catch, turn those short to intermediate routes into big gainers. Now, obviously, with Malik Nabers on board, I don't know how the pass distribution is going to go, but I do think that Robinson, even if he gets a reduction in his passes, he's going to be a contributor. He's going to be somebody who, the team's going to really lean on heavily. And again, we saw it starting last year when he got over that hump. And I think it's going to continue this year because of just all the different things he can do in that offense in terms of running out of the backfield, lining up in the slot, going in motion, all that stuff. So he's definitely one to watch for. Now, this one on offense, I bet you nobody's going to see coming, but I'm going to mention him anyway. Center John Michael Schmitz. All right. And you're like, what? An offensive lineman as a breakout candidate? Yeah, hear me out on this one. All right. Now, I get it that the offensive line has to play as one. 5 guys need to play as one. John Michael Schmitz last year, I know a lot of us, including myself, were excited that the Giants drafted him, but he had kind of an up and down type of a year, right? He gave up 30 pressures last year. I think 8 of those pressures came in the last game of the season, if I'm not mistaken, but a little bit inconsistent. And he also, of course, had the shoulder injury, which was part of the problem. The Giants really need that young man to step up and take his game to a whole nother level this year. As the conductor of that offensive line, the guy who's making the calls, the guy who's, usually going to be in the middle of those duo blocks, especially along the interior, which was a problem, by the way, last year. The Giants' interior offensive line allowed the most pressures up the gut and through the guard gaps, the A gaps. So, John Michael Schmitz really needs to take his game to the next level. Now, I personally think last year was up and down for him, not just because of the injury, but the coaching. And, with Carmen Brasillo on board, I think John Michael Schmitz, I think all those offensive linemen are we're going to see a big, big improvement in all those offensive linemen, including Evan Neal. Yes. I do think Evan Neal will improve if he is healthy. So John Michael Schmitz, definitely a guy that you want to see take his game up a few notches. And I think he'll do it. I think, if he's healthy, he'll be fine. And he'll turn into one of the solid centers of the NFL. All right, switching over to defense. I've got 2 for you. I'm going to start with cornerback Deonte Banks. All right. Deonte Banks last year showed that he could be a legitimate number 1 shutdown cornerback. He's going to do even better things this year. More turnovers, I think, more pass breakups. His run support started to get better. This is a young man who, if he stays healthy, I could see him knock on the door for maybe a Pro Bowl berth. All right. He's just, the scheme that they're going to play. They're going to do a little less with man coverage under Shane Bowen, more zone coverage. He's going to be fine. He's going to have to, obviously step up in zone coverage, which can be sometimes tricky for a rookie, but I think Deonte Banks is going to have a big, big year for that Giants defense. And look, he's going to be a staple against some of those speedy receivers the Giants are going to see this year. So Banks, I'm counting on for a big year. The other guy on defense, I'm counting on for a big year. You're going to say you're crazy for naming this guy, but I'm going to go with Brian Burns. All right. So why Brian Burns? Brian Burns has done pretty well so far. He's never had a season where he's had fewer than 7.5 sacks, but he's also never really had a true partner in crime, if you will, to help him out. So, when you just have one pass rusher and no partner in crime, now the opposing offense can double or triple team you, and they don't really worry about the other guys. Well, now the Giants have Burns, they have Kayvon Thibodeau, they have Dexter Lawrence, a 3-headed monster, if you will. And let's not forget Azeez Ojulari if he's healthy. So that's a 4-headed monster. All right. Good luck picking out who you're going to double team if you're playing the Giants. All right. So what I could see potentially happening is Brian Burns hitting double digit sacks this year. I think he's going to get pretty close to it, if not reach that. Not really, a true breakout season per se, but a big first season is what I think he's going to have with the Giants, and one that I'm looking forward to seeing, because this is a guy who, the pass rush is there. He's a guy who can play the run, decently. And I think he's going to really make a big difference for a Giants defense, which their pass rush win rate was ranked 21st according to ESPN's advanced statistics. So I'd like to see that maybe move up. And I think Brian Burns will be a big part of helping that ranking move up. All right. Coming up next, I have a few leftover thoughts about the 2024 schedule. Please don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, TGIF. We made it through another week, everybody. So I hope everybody had a great week, and we have a great weekend planned ahead. I know I do. In this segment of the Locked On Giants podcast, some final thoughts, miscellaneous thoughts, if you will, about the New York Giants 2024 schedule. And I kind of put these thoughts together for an article I did on the Giants team page over on SI.com's Fan Nation, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about them here in this particular segment, because there are some intangibles and stuff that I want to talk about. So basically what I did was I listed several categories, and I'll just go through them real quick and tell you what I think about each one. What is the key to a week one victory for the Giants? So week one, the Giants have they have the Minnesota Vikings at home. And I started to look at matchups for that one initially. And then I realized, you know what, let me back up a little bit. The key for the Giants for a week one victory is they cannot do what they did last year in training camp. Now, I have said before that I did not feel the Giants prepared as well as they could for the start of last season. They came out and they got their butts kicked by the Dallas Cowboys. It was 40-0, if you remember. And one of the things, actually a couple of things that Brian Daboll did last year that I did not like, and I hope he does not repeat this year, twofold. Number one, the starters, in my opinion, did not get enough preseason snaps. Now, maybe he was thinking, okay, look, I know what I've got. Let me take a look at some of these younger guys who maybe I want to keep. Okay, great. I get it. You want to see as many guys as possible. You want to give as many guys as opportunities as possible. But he only gave the starters, if I remember correctly, like one or two series in one preseason game. That's just not enough, because look, coaches will say that they try to, recreate the tempo of a game in practice. They can't. Reason being, they don't want guys tackling each other and putting them on the ground. Okay, so right off the bat, that argument goes out the window. The speed of the practice isn't as intense as it is in a game. So it just cannot be recreated, in my opinion. And I just felt like when the starters got back out there on the field and the key subs and whatnot, they just were out of sorts. It looked like, they weren't ready, and they weren't. And I know that the Giants started that game off week one against the Cowboys last year. They started off looking good, and then everything fell out. The bottom fell out. But overall, look back and you'll see that team just was not ready. The other thing that the Giants have got to do, get your lineup set, not in the days leading up to the to the first game, but beforehand. Now, last year, one of my complaints, for lack of a better word, was they were still playing around with different offensive line combinations as late as into the first week of the regular season when they should have been game planning and preparing. And they're still screwing around with different, lineups. They moved Joshua Zudo, for example, who hadn't worked at all at left tackle. Now all of a sudden he's at left tackle, practicing there. They moved Shane Lemieux, who was on the team at the time, who hadn't worked with the first team offensive line. He was working with them. You can't do that, especially for a unit like that, the offensive line that has to solidify. So I would hope that this time around, make up your mind who your best five are. Let them get snaps both in practice and in the preseason games, whether it's just 1 or 2 games or whatever. Let them gel. They never did that. And that was a big, big problem. So hopefully those two things, if Brian Dable, adapts and changes up things, those two things will make a difference. And the Giants will come out looking more prepared than they did last year. Okay, the next thing on my list, the must-watch game of the season. That's an easy one. Week 7, Philadelphia's Saquon's return. Look, the Giants are probably going to downplay it. I know the media will probably make a big deal about it because it's Saquon's return. And, Saquon, the face of the franchise, he's coming back after not getting, an offer from the Giants this free agency cycle to stay on. It's going to be a big deal. The fans are going to be emotionally charged. Folks, it's going to be a really, intense game. I mean, Giants-Eagles is always intense. The return of Saquon is going to crank that intensity up several notches. So that, in my mind, makes it a must-watch. The toughest stretch, that one is easy. Weeks 3 through 8. Now, it's not because, the schedule is such that, they have one game on top of one another, but week 3 at Cleveland, then they have a Thursday night game at home against Dallas. Then they go all the way out west to Seattle, come back for a Monday night game against Cincinnati. Then they have the week 7 game against the Eagles at home, then a Monday night game against the Steelers. Oh my gosh. Talk about a murderer's row, right? That, ladies and gentlemen, is a tough stretch. And I'll tell you, if the Giants don't start off 2-0, it's going to be a long, long season, I think, because that is a really, really tough stretch. All right. Can't lose game. Week 2 against Washington. Now, look, Washington, this is not your grandfather's Washington Commanders. This is not a team, I think, that, like we have seen in the past where the Giants have had Washington's number. They got a new head coach in Dan Quinn, new quarterback, Jaden Daniels. That defensive front is still very solid for them. I do not think Washington is going to be a pushover. I think the Giants, will win against Minnesota, but they cannot afford to lose against Washington in week 2. If they go 1-1 or God forbid 0-2, oh boy, I don't think I want to see social media after those games because I think it's going to get ugly. So I have that Washington game as a can't lose game for the New York Giants. Technically, they're all games that they shouldn't lose or can't lose, but that one in particular, because you want to start the season off 2-0 before you get into that murderer's row that I talked about. The trap game, that's going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All right. That is week 12 after the bye week. Why do I say it's a trap game? The Giants have a 44.2% winning percentage after a bye, which is ranked 26th in the league. They just, for whatever the reason, now I know they've had recent success after a bye, but they look like, I guess flat. It's almost like the momentum stops and it takes some time to rev up a little bit. So while I think that that's a game that the Giants will and can win against the Bucs, I see it as a trap game. So that is my choice there. Now, best offense and best defense. The best offense that the Giants are going to face, that's easy. I'm going to go with Baltimore. Lamar Jackson, still doing Lamar Jackson things. He's the reigning league MVP. Runner up, you can say, I suppose, would be Cincinnati, but I'm going to give Baltimore the edge here on this one. The best defense, I'm going with Philly over Dallas. Yep. Howie Roseman did a really good job beefing up the defensive secondary, which was a big, big weakness for that Eagles team. And, he got himself a pair of cornerbacks that are going to match up well with the speedsters in the division, as well as the speedsters that the Eagles are going to face. So I'm looking already at that game, and I'm going to say one of the keys is going to be how the Giants receivers hold up against that Philadelphia defensive secondary. So we'll see how it all plays out. And, I also had the Giants finishing third place in the NFC East. Now, yesterday, I think I did a show and I had them winning 10 games. I went through it again for that article that I wrote, and I think I had them winning 9 games. I think I had them going 9-8. Still an improvement, which they need, but there was one game that I was kind of iffy about, and I kept going back and forth, and I changed my mind on it. And I think the game that I changed my mind on was, let me see, it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I had them down as a win initially. Now I've got them down as a loss because I do think that's a trap game. So that being said, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you for spending part of your day with us here. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again on Monday with all new episodes of Locked On Giants.